center was started by Swami Swahanandaji and is now looked after by Swami Sarvadevanandaji, and many of you here are close to both of the Swamis, maybe disciples of one or the other, that I would talk on this subject because it involves both of them very much. I recently took a fairly long trip to India and Bangladesh, and the purpose of the trip was the inauguration of a temple in a village by the name of Baniachong in the Sylhet district of Bangladesh. And this is Swami Swanandaji's, what they call Mamar Bari. It's his mother's place. So his maternal uncle is from that place. And there's some confusion about whether or not Swamiji was born there, because it's very standard, typical for the mother to go back to her own home and when she's ready to give birth. But both Swamiji's cousin and Nishit Maharaj's mother, who was his nephew, both of them say he was actually born in Habiganj. Anyhow, doesn't matter. Habiganj is the town where he grew up. His situation was unusual because his father passed away before he was born. Yeah, and some of you may know the story. Swamiji's father was a boyhood friend of Swami Parameshananda. Swami Parameshanandaji was a disciple of the Holy Mother, and the inspiration, the leading light of the Ramakrishna movement in East Bengal at that time. So many people were inspired to join and become monks through him. And Swami Parameshanandaji inspired Swami Swanandaji's father to take initiation with Holy Mother. He wanted permission from Holy Mother to become a sannyasi. So he requested Holy Mother to give her blessings. This is Swamiji's father. And she said, "No, my child, it's not for you. This married life is for you, but there'll be two in your family line who will become sannyasis." Swamiji's father lived just long enough so that Swamiji could be born, and then passed away. So then Swamiji was born, and Swamiji's elder brother has one son, Nishit Maharaj, who is also a monk of the order. So the words of Holy Mother were fulfilled. Two in that family line became sannyasis. So in any event, Habiganj is the place where Swamiji grew up, and where he went to school. It was very common in those days. You'll go into the town and attend school there, and that's where he first went to the ashram when he was around 13. He spent his whole childhood from that time on in that ashram. Some of you have probably heard stories that he spent so much time in the library that they gave him the key, and he was in charge of it. And I asked him one time, "How old were you when you decided you want to become a monk?" And he said 14. Yeah. And it was from there that, as a young boy, he wrote to Swami Akhandanandaji, who was president of the order, requesting permission to come and take initiation, and told all of his friends, "I'll be initiated by the president of the order." By the time he was ready to do it, Swami Akhandananda passed away, and everybody, they teased him. They said, "You said you'd be initiated by him." He said, "No, I said I would be initiated by the president of the order." At that time it was Swami Vijnananandaji. So he went and had his initiation from him. And this is all beside the point. But the purpose of this trip was to go to this Baniachong because there's a branch center looked after by Habiganj, the two places where Swamiji was associated, and they had just completed a temple. So there was a big temple opening. All of the Swamis from heads of center from Bangladesh went, many of the Swamis from India, and Swami Sarvadevanandaji and I went together from here because we were both instrumental in helping to raise funds and everything for that temple. So it was a very joyful occasion. Swami Swanji has many family members still living there in Banyuchong and in Hobbyganj and other places, whom I've known since my first visit there in 1992. So it was kind of a homecoming. I've kept contact with them through all these years and everything. And Swamiji's cousin, Tapan Bishash, is the president of the trust there, since it's a private organization. So he was in charge of the whole function and everything. So before I left for the trip, I had to give it a title for a lecture. So the title I actually gave was Rejuvenated, because I know that whenever I come back from a trip like this in India, I feel some special inspiration. So I wanted to talk about the need to every once in a while do something to increase that enthusiasm for spiritual life, because there's every chance that it'll lessen without our even knowing it. So every once in a while we have to do something, go on pilgrimage or spend some time in solitude, something, so that we can feel that we're rejuvenated, something like that. So that's kind of the history behind all of this. I remember before I joined the order, I joined in our Southern California Center in the Tribuca Monastery in 1981. That one senior Swami gave me two very important pieces of advice that I've kept I tried to keep as strictly as I can. There's two things. One, he said, when you go there, he said, wear blinders. So that means don't look from side to side. Don't compare yourself with other people. Don't bother who's ahead of you, who's behind you, who goes to the shrine, who doesn't go to the shrine. Just look straight ahead, have your goal, have your routine, everything. Follow that very strictly. So this was the first thing. Very good piece of advice. Don't worry about what people think of you or what they say or anything like that. So wear blinders. You know what they do with the horse. If the horse looks side to side, he'll lose the race. If he looks straight ahead, he can go as fast as he wants. Then the second, which is pertinent to this topic today, is keep the fire burning. So this is really what we try to do in spiritual life, because it may not go out, but the flame will become less and less. We have to really make every effort to assure ourselves that initial enthusiasm that we have for spiritual life, that it remains, it gets stronger and stronger. Because the tendency for everything is inertia. And without even knowing it, everything becomes a little routine and sometimes a little stale even. Same meditation day after day, same japa day after day. So we need to really make this effort to fan the flames. Totapuri, Sri Ramakrishna's Vedanta guru, he used to say, if you have a brass pot and you polish it, that unless you polish it every day, it'll get tarnished. Next day, it'll be tarnished. So every day you have to start afresh. So we have to do that also in spiritual life. We do it partly with regularity with regard to our routine. That means that we try to keep the same time. If we can get up early in the morning, do our spiritual practice and everything, we do it that way. But there's also something special about pilgrimage. Thakur doesn't talk about it very much. That sometimes they would say, we want to go on pilgrimage here and there. He'd say, better you stay here, because he knew he was the greatest pilgrimage place. So we shouldn't take that too literally. For us, if we can visit these places, then there's great inspiration. So we need from time to time to go back and to reevaluate and try to make a fresh start in our spiritual life. There's an order of Catholic nuns. I don't remember the details. I read this many years ago. They have a very interesting practice. When they come to join, they'll have one set of Western clothes, before they were a habit. So they'll keep this, they'll keep it in the closet, and they'll shave their head or cut their hair very short, and they'll take vows. Their vows will be to remain a nun for a lifetime. Whenever we take monastic vows, it's with that idea. It'll be for a lifetime. But before the first year is over, they take that one set of clothes, they wash them, they get them all ready, they let their hair grow out, so that if they want to leave, they can leave, no questions asked. It's not like they have to, apologize or anything, that it just didn't work out. It's assumed that they're free to go if they want to. If they want to stay, they take vows again, they shave their head again, they do everything again. So that each year they have the same feeling of inspiration they felt at the very first. It's a very interesting practice that they have. I was wondering how this would work with marriages. At the end of the year, there's no question of divorce. At the end of the year, you're not married anymore. You want to remain married, you have to go through the ceremony again. You have to both decide that this is what you want for a lifetime. And year after year, some people do it. They renew their marriage vows. So this is a way of kind of renewing this initial dedication we have for, here in this case, monastic life, but we can say spiritual life in general. So for me, one way of feeling this renewed inspiration is pilgrimage. And this is what we did. I was with Swami Sarvadevanandaji, so it wasn't just this trip. The Bangladesh trip was only 10 days, and we were in India over 5 weeks. So the rest of it was mostly, well, actually all in West Bengal, and going to many pilgrimage places and places of service, which I'll get to also. I remember a conversation I had with Swami Bhuteshanandaji. One time, Swami Bhuteshanandaji was 12th president of the order, and he was my sannyas guru. I had my brahmacharya vows and sannyas vows with Swami Bhuteshanandaji. And the president of the order, we get to see the president, even though he's our own guru. Very rarely will we have some very good opportunity for some long conversation or personal things. But normally, when we first go and the day that we leave, we get a chance to go and sit with him a little bit. So I remember this one time, I said to him, Maharaj, when I'm in India, when I'm at Bellarmith and everything, I feel a tremendous inspiration. How to keep that inspiration when I go back? Now, I found with Swami Bhuteshanandaji, and there'll be several references to him, that he never gave me exactly the answer that I expected. And it was always a better answer. I expected him to say, Thakur is there also. Why is it just here? You can feel inspiration wherever you are. But he didn't say that. He said, then come whenever you can. Come whenever you can. Then he said, everyone loves you here. He was very sweet like that. I don't know how many of you knew him, but he had this tremendous sweetness to him. If anybody ever received a scolding in Bellarmith, and believe me, it happens a lot, they would say, no, go to Swami Bhuteshanandaji. He'll soothe everything. Yeah. So the first part was, of course, this trip to Bangladesh. I mentioned already Swami Paramashanandaji. We went to his birthplace. And there's so many associations, so many stories. I don't know how many of you are familiar with his life at all, but he actually did something very similar to Sri Ramakrishna. That there was a period in his life where he had this tremendous longing for God realization, and he spent all of his time alone in this one little hut, which is still there, by the way. In Dulali. It's a place in Seret, which we went to see. I'd been there earlier. Anyhow, one night he resolved that unless he had the vision of Mother, that he would take his life. And he actually had a noose that he strung over one of the beams, the rafter beams there, and was ready to take his life. And with that, with that tremendous yearning and longing for God, he had the vision of the Divine Mother that night, and wrote some beautiful song about her that time. So anyhow, so many associations with Swami Swananji, who is my Gurudev, and going to his birthplace, going to his father's home and his mother's home and everything. This also was a tremendously inspiring thing for me. So it reminded me of this idea of this renewed inspiration. Another thing that Swami Bhuteshanandaji said, and this is something also very, very important, when he was asked by some of the young monks, how do we keep this inspiration, and how do we keep it fresh, the spiritual practice? And he said on several different occasions, try to remember how you felt when you first joined the order. Or with a householder, I'd remember when you first took initiation, or when you first felt some inspiration in spiritual life. There are certain incidents in my life I remember very clearly. The first time I read the works of Swamiji. I was 24 years old. I was in Chennai at the time. I bought a little book, and I just remember just being in awe, and just that feeling. When we sit for meditation, we can try to remember how we felt at times like that. Or the first time that I went into Thakur's room at Dakshineshwar. How it just felt like I was in a different location out of this earth. How we entered into heaven itself somehow. To remember how we felt at that time. And of course, joining the order for the monks the day that we take sannyasa. How much vairagya we feel, how much dispassion for the world, longing for God realization. So when we sit for meditation, we try to bring that back into our minds, try to feel that. So this is something that we all can do. I even sometimes, when I sit for meditation, try to remember how I felt when I was a college student living in Philadelphia. Because at that time, I hadn't joined yet. I had a tremendous desire to be a monk. And I didn't know how I would do it, or where I would do it, or anything. And sometimes when I sit, I'll try to remember how I felt those days. And then in our youth, when we have this great longing, even sometimes tears would come, this great longing for spiritual life. So this was a great piece of advice, that we can try to imagine and remember how we felt at a particular time when we had that inspiration. Another way of bringing this new inspiration. Yeah, my first visit to Dakshineshwar, this was in 1972, and I took the boat across the Ganges, that ferry, just as the sun was going down, just as we read when M went on his first trip. The same thing, how you could hear the blowing of the conch shell and the ringing of the bells and the gongs and all of that, arati going on. I got there just at that same time with all of that, just as the sun is going down, and walking into Thakur's room, you could feel his presence. Really, and then sitting there just in front of his cot, remembering all of the things that happened there. So this is why, if we can do that, if we go to these places and we really think about it very deeply, how it's very, very helpful in spiritual life. This was one of the great teachings of Mahendranath Gupta, the recorder of the Gospel of Ramakrishna. Whenever anyone would go to him, he would ask, have you been to Dakshineshwar? Have you been to Balarmat, but especially Dakshineshwar? And if they said no, he would say go. Sometimes he would even go with them. This happened to Swami Parmeshananda before he joined, Indra Dayal. He went to see M more than anybody else at that time, because he had just read the first volume of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, in Bengali of course, Kathamrita, and he had a tremendous desire to meet M. So when he went to Calcutta, that M was the first person that he met. Then M sent him to Dakshineshwar, and by chance, Swami Ramananda was there and some of the other direct disciples. So he met them there. But M used to say, go to Dakshineshwar, but don't go just like a tourist, and don't go to just sit there and close your eyes to meditate. When you go, look at every corner very carefully. Remember all of the things that took place when Sri Ramakrishna was alive. You can look in that one, if you look at the westernmost part of his room, where Thakur sat, facing north, Holy Mother sat facing east, and he worshipped her as Shodashi. Etch that very deeply in your mind and in your heart. Picture where Rakal was massaging Thakur's feet, and he had his first ecstasy. Go out to the veranda where Thakur touched Swamiji the first time that he met him, and he went into ecstasy and all that. And so that when you sit for meditation, you can remember all of these things, and you can be there. You can feel as if you're present at the time these things took place. So this is a very wonderful teaching of the M, and so I do that. I've been to Dakshineshwar so many times. When I lived in India, I lived there for 1 year at a stretch once. I would go once a month, pretty much. And so now, and read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. That also throws the mind right there. Then we're living in that golden period between 1882 and 1885, Dakshineshwar, later Kashipur, of course. So when we sit for meditation, we feel that we're there, that we go back into time, and we transcend time and space, and we're sitting in Thakur's room, and it's 1882, 83, 84, 85, like that. It's even nice to take some physical object, to buy something in a place of pilgrimage. I went to a place called Chitrakoot. Has anybody been there? A charming place. Yeah, associated with the life of Rama and Sita. One tradition is that they had their wedding there and everything. There's so many nice traditions, and it's just charming. Very small place, right on the Ganga and everything. And I bought a Shiva Lingam for a couple of rupees. Nothing. But I keep it on my shrine, and when I see it, it reminds me of that place. The mind goes back there. So all of these associations are very, very important. There's a section from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna that I like very much. A very touching scene where M is talking to Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna was talking about some of his spiritual experiences. M remained silent with wonder. I'm reading from the English translation. He plucked 1 or 2 leaves from a branch in the Panchavati and put them in his pocket. Master, Sri Ramakrishna, see there, that branch has been broken. I used to sit under it when he did all of his sadhana at that time under the Panchavati. M, I took a young twig from that tree. I have it at home. Master, why? M, I feel very happy when I look at it. After all this is over, this place will be considered very holy. Yeah. Who knew how holy? Now, my goodness, how many thousands of people go almost daily to see tremendous crowds and everything. This is Swami Paramashananda. He wrote these series of poems called Chardham. Chardham, generally we think there's these 4 holy places in India. There are different traditions again. For some, it'll be Gangotri, Yamunotri, Kedarnath, Badrinath. For some, it'll be Amarnath, Rameshwaram, Dwarkapuri. It'll be different things. For him, it was Kamarpukur, Jadambati, Dakshineshwar, and Velarmat. And he wrote these beautiful poems and songs in honor of these 4 places, and he called it Chardham. So these are all very, very holy places. Velarmat, the atmosphere there is something tremendous. And you know, Sri Ramakrishna walked the grounds of Velarmat. Did you know that? Yeah. Because he used to cross the other side. There's a Shiva temple he used to visit, and for some reason it was just an open field at that time. For some reason he went for a walk on that area and everything. So even Thakur was there. Of course, all of the direct disciples and everything. Now, what is the reason for the Why is this so beneficial? Let me put it that way, in meditation. It struck me one day that in meditation, generally we're asked to do two things. One, we try to repeat a mantra that will have the name of our Ishtadevata, our chosen deity will be included in that mantra, and we try to imagine or project the image of the chosen deity. Now, imagining something and remembering something, what's the difference between the two? If you really think about it, if I say try to imagine that you're sitting in your room at home, what will you do? You'll remember when you sat in your room at home, right? It's mostly memory, what we call imagination, or otherwise, if you've never been to some place, someone says try to picture what it, to sit in, to go to Mount Kailash and to sit there, but I've never been there. So then you piece together things that you remember, places that you've been, what you think it might look like. So that's also mostly memory. But if you've been someplace, then trying to imagine it or picture it in your mind is more or less the same as remembering when you were there. Only we place it in the present, that's all. We try to feel that it's taking place here and now. So this is one reason why it's so helpful to go to these holy places, to really look around, concentrate, to try to the same way that if we read some verses from a text that we want to memorize, we'll read it differently. We'll look at things and with that same idea that we want to remember them. We want to remember where each picture was hanging on the wall. The Thakur every morning would go and clap his hands and recite it. All of these things are very, very helpful in spiritual life. So, a lot of this trip that I took had to do with these four holy places. Of course, we stayed at Balarmat. The very first place we went to the day after we arrived was Dakshineshwar. We went early morning, and we sat there for meditation. We visited all of the places, Belpuri, Panchavati, all of the places associated with Thakur's spiritual practices and everything. And there's so many places in the Kolkata area. We went to Mother's house, Mayabadi, Udbodhan, Kashipur, even Alamazar Mat. So all of the places that are connected, M's house, and it's tremendously inspiring because we really see how these things actually happened. We feel that connection to the past. When we go, we see the actual jacket that Thakur used to wear, the shoes that he wore, all of these things, and we feel this special connection, and we feel it to be something very, very real. So, tremendous spiritual food that we consume when we go to these places of pilgrimage. Now, most of the time that we were there, we were in Balarmat. We actually stayed for a few days, then traveled, then came back for a few days, then traveled, then came back for a few days. So probably three. Probably we were there about 9 days. And they have a guest house there that people can stay. And you can go for early morning meditation. There's Mangal Arati, 4 o'clock in the morning, half of the year, and 4:30 in the morning, half of the year. When we were there, it was the cold half of the year, so it was 4:30. Then as soon as it becomes the warm season, it goes to 4 o'clock. It's such a tremendously inspiring experience to see this Mangal Arati. See so many monks sitting there quietly in meditation, and then the Pujari was so gracefully waving the lights. It's mesmerizing, just so beautiful, ringing the bell, waving the lights. Yes. Yeah. So every morning to have that experience, then in the evening to hear so many monks singing full-throated the Arati songs, and again not just waving the lights, but with the chamar and everything. It's just really tremendously inspiring to sit there with so many the monks of the order and devotees who are staying there also. When I would go. Generally, Mangal Arati began at 4:30. I would get there a few minutes early, and so I couldn't sit there and everything. And I noticed that some of the same monks were always sitting there. So then I thought, let me go earlier. So I went 15 minutes earlier. The same ones are sitting there. And then I said, let me go a half hour earlier. So I went at 4 o'clock, same ones. And then it occurred to me that some of these would probably have been there for a couple of hours. So very quietly, with no fanfare, no one knowing it, how some of these sadhus, such tremendous discipline, such tremendous longing, such tremendous devotion, spending so many long hours in meditation before others are getting there even. And if you wander around even in the middle of the night in Bellarmine, you'll find one or two sitting. Some will go up on the balcony in Swamiji's temple. They'll be sitting there at night, some of the banks of the Ganges. Nobody knows about this. Because they Thakur said, don't let anybody know about your spiritual practice. Let it be, if it's a very sacred thing, let it be a little bit of a secret thing. Now, the holy company at Bellarmine for me wasn't simply at the time of worship, the time in the temple, even going for meals and sitting with all of the brother monks there. If you see them, you go to Bellarmine, you see them, they'll look a little bit formal. You won't really, if you see them at mealtime and other times laughing and joking and teasing and everything, you see a whole different side of it. So this feeling of brotherhood is a very wonderful thing. And then there were several times when afterwards we would just stand around after meals and there would be some spiritual conversation. These older monks would talk about some of their reminiscences and things, and just some beautiful, very memorable things came out of these. There was one particular conversation with Swami Divyanandaji. He came to this country. I don't know if any of you met him. Swami Divyanandaji, he's a trustee of the order. He's big and strong, very bold. He started this wonderful program for prisoners when he was in Malda. He did tremendous work with people that nobody cared about, with rehabilitation of the prisoners after they left and getting them jobs and everything. Very, very wonderful Swami. Anyhow, he was telling the story about Swami Bhuteshanandaji, again, 12th president of the order. Somebody had gone to him, some of the young monks, and asked for his blessing. Now again, it wasn't exactly the answer that we might expect, but he said, yes, I bless you, that may you always have the protection of the order. May you always live your full life as a monk of the Ramakrishna order. He didn't say, may you have God realization, anything like that. He said this very wonderful thing. May you always have the protection of the order. May you spend your whole life as a monk of the order. And he said it with such tremendous faith and such devotion. These things leave a great imprint on the mind. And then we also feel what a tremendous grace it is to be a member of the order or a devotee of the order. It doesn't have to be monastic. If we really feel that our life is being lived according to the ideal that we have from Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Swamiji, all their direct disciples. Then we had one monk by the name of Govinda Maharaj. He was for many years at our headquarters, and all of the foreign monks who would go would be looked after by Govinda Maharaj. He was very sweet and loving, but also very strong. So we would keep our bags in his room. He had no room even to walk around. He would make sure that we were taking care of those who needed boiled water. He would bring boiled water for them, everything. Yeah, very loving soul. Then he was in charge of Atpur for many years. If any of you went to Atpur, another great pilgrimage place, Swami Premananda's birthplace, this is where all of the direct disciples went. And under Swamiji's leadership on Christmas Eve, they all took monastic vows, informally at that time. This Govinda Maharaj came down with cancer, and they had to remove part of his jaw, and he's in a wheelchair. They have to wheel him there. He can just get out of the wheelchair, and just with small steps he can go into the shrine. Every morning for 4:30 he was there. Every evening for Arati he was there. I mean, for us, it's nothing. We have to wake up early in the morning, that's all. But such effort and such devotion that he never missed it, and always cheerful, always smiling, and with always the chocolates in his pocket to give to everybody. Yeah. So we see monks like this, and really it's tremendously inspiring. I find it very inspiring when I see new monks, those who have just joined, for the same reason, because that fresh inspiration is there. And now, we have one at our center now, Kumar. He just recently joined. So many are coming to the West, getting PhD, getting a good job, or at least the opportunity for a good job where they can make good money, have a very easy life, and yet they're giving it all up and joining the order. There's several of them now. Many of them are at the university, Vivekananda University there. So it's very inspiring to see them. And the young monks who take sannyasa, there's one order, I don't know where it is, one of them in Aztec orders, I heard, that the day that the brahmacharis take sannyasa, the senior sadhus, the tradition is that they'll go and they'll make pranam to everybody. But this particular order, the senior sadhus come and take the dust of their feet, make pranam to them, because they have such tremendous purity and renunciation the day that they take sannyasa, that they feel it's a blessing for them to take the dust of their feet that way. I was there when they had the closing ceremonies for the training center. There's a 2-year training center at Bellarmad. So the brahmacharis are there, all the senior monks are there, the president of the order, all the trustees, vice presidents, and the one member of the first year training center and one from the second year training center, they speak, and the president of the order and the others, they also speak. And it's very inspiring to see how, after 2 years of intense study, how they feel this great devotion and dedication to the order. One other thing that I found very inspiring, this the idea of detachment, because one feature of the Ramakrishna order is that we can be serving in one place one day, and the next day we're told to leave. You have to go someplace else, and we have to be ready at any moment. And very often is after long years of building up one center, working very hard. I remember the Habigan Center was started really by one Swami, Nikhil Maharaj. He went there was nothing there. There's just a couple of old buildings. He built a new temple, he built a new place for the sadhus, and a new place for students. He did all of this work. We had a big temple opening, and practically the next day they said, "You're transferred." Yeah, they sent him to Chittagong because he did such a good job. They're sending him to some place to do the same thing, and he did the same thing. He built now there's a temple there. Yeah, but when I was there's one relatively young Swami, at least compared to me, a young Swami named Tapas Maharaj. If you go and stay at Bellarmad, he was the one who would arrange for your room. So many of our Western devotees know him very well, and very efficient and very sweet-natured, very, very good. He was perfect for that job. And when I was there, I know him for a long time. He's very, very nice. When I was there, we heard that he was being transferred to a very difficult center, kind of a tribal area where there's not much money and everything. And so I saw him, and he said, "Yeah, it was a bit of a shock. They called me in, say you're being transferred." But he said, "But wherever Thakur sends me, I'll do the best that I can. That's all that I can do." He took it in such a nice way. Now, the Swami who took his place is also very, very close to me. We had sannyas together. And he was in Kamarpakur before. Such a wonderful place, in a village center where Thakur, of course, was born and grew up and everything. Then he finds himself at Bellarmad, and a position where you're constantly on the phone, constantly dealing with devotees, a very difficult position. And his attitude was the same. Yes, what can I do? I'll do my best. I'll try. So both of them were really wonderful examples of this detachment that we have to have, because monks are like anybody else. We can form an attachment to, wherever we are, whatever center we're staying in. That becomes our samsara. Yeah, and the Swami Paramhansa, he used to warn the monks. He said, don't let the ashram become samsara. Don't let it become like the householder's own house and family and members and everything, where you have that type of attachment. Anytime, we can be asked to leave, we should be ready to leave. This reminds me of another story about Swami Bhuteshanandaji. I'll tell two stories, just because the first one popped into my head. It's another story about detachment of somebody else. Swami Bhuteshanandaji went to stay in Uttarkashi for 4 years. He stayed there for 4 years. Now it's a bit of a town. It's a district town, and it's crowded. At that time, there were almost exclusively sadhus there, and a few places where you could beg your food. So he went there to practice these very extreme austerities, and generally, you don't make reservations in a hotel or something. You go there and you ask around, because there are little huts or little rooms in places where the sadhus can stay. So he found one elderly sadhu, and he went up to him and he said, "Is there any place where I can stay?" And the sadhu said, "Yes, come with me." And he took him to a room and he said, "You can stay here." And then the sadhu left. Later he heard that sadhu had lived in that room for something like 40 years. And he saw this young sadhu looking for a place, so he said, "Stay here." And then he went, God knows where he went. Yeah, something like that. Don't quote me on it. Anyhow, that's the gist of the story. Yeah. Anyhow, this other story about Swami Bhuteshanandaji. He was so sweet and loving that if there was any difficult place, they would send him there. So he was called into headquarters when he was still a rather young monk, and his brother monks warned him. He said, "They're going to call you into, the trustees are going to call you in, and they're going to ask if you're willing to go to a center that we have in Assam called Cherrapunji." Cherrapunji at that time was going through a difficult period. It's always going through a difficult period. It's a tribal area, and there's always trouble with some of the tribal people who are against the order and Christian missionaries. So it was a constant battle in those days. At one time they even cut off the water supply there. So it was a very, very difficult posting. So his friends all said to him, "Don't go. They're not going to force you to go. If you say you don't want to go, please forgive me," they'll say, "Okay." Now he was very simple. So just like Thakur, if people said to him, "Try this. This is, stick your head out of the door when you're in the carriage. It's good for you." So he said, "Oh, so I did it. I caught cold."
Yeah.
Remember that? So he was like that. He was very simple. He didn't think about it too much. So they called him in, and they said that we. Wondering, would you mind going to Cherrapunji? They weren't going to force him because it was a difficult thing. So with folded hands, he said, "Please forgive me. I'm very happy at my center. Please don't mind." They said, "Oh, okay." So that was the end of it, he thought. But the next day, he heard that one of his brother monks now was being sent to Cherrapunji. And then he said, "Oh my God, what did I do?" He said, "Because of my refusal, that he has to go." So immediately he went to headquarters and said, "Yep, please forgive me. I should have accepted right away that I'm willing to go." So then he went, and of course solved all the problems as well. Yeah. So this detachment, this willingness to go anywhere, this love of brother monks, we see all of these things combined in the lives of some of these very special souls that way. He was born in a place called Somsar. And it's a small village. It was such a charming village, my goodness. It's in West Bengal, not far from Balarmat, a couple of hours, something like that. We went there. This is one of the places we went to. And I'll get to this. We went to many private centers, because this is just a private center. It was started by some of his disciples and very close devotees of his. The work that's being done by our private centers is also something very, very special. But we went to this place, and they started a dispensary there and a school and everything. So that was really also a very nice experience. So this brings me to this other point, that it's not just the monks of the order, that were inspiring to me, but the householder devotees who, despite all of their duties, raising a family and career, were so dedicated to the service, to the work of the order, and most of it to village work and education of the poor children, many tribals also. So a big part of our trip was visiting all of these small centers. Now I'm going to tell you something very secret about Swami Sarvadevanandaji, because he doesn't talk about it very much. But he was posted in a place called Shikra Kulingram for many years. This is the birthplace of Swami Ramananda. Shikra Kulingram. And it's in this area called 24 Parganas. They're just bordering the Sundarban area. When Swami Sarvadevanandaji was there, he was very, very active, probably in starting some of the centers and probably just keeping them going. But all of these private centers in the Sundarban area, this is a very jungle area with rivers and everything, a very poor area, and a lot of the tribal people are still there. All of these different centers, they run orphanages, and they run schools and free dispensaries and everything for the very, very poor village kids, people in general, and some training programs for the women so that they can earn some money. So when we came back from Bangladesh, we went straight to Shikra, and from there we went one by one to all of these little centers. Yeah, and he was welcomed like he was royalty. They loved him so much. Even today, these centers would not run without money that he sends back there. Whatever money he gets, he sends it. He won't talk about these things. I never knew this. But tremendous work they did. And his brother was with us on this whole trip. I met all of his family members also. It was a very nice thing. We don't usually think that monks have family members. They do.
Brother lives in India.
Huh?
They all live in India.
Yeah, yeah. And his brother, younger brother, never married, but had his career and everything. But every spare moment is dedicated to the work of the order. And he's the one who goes from village to village to village and helps give them funds and organize things and everything. Tremendously dedicated person, and so simple and so humble that for me to see these householder devotees like that was equally as inspiring as to see the monks of the order. And another kind of secret thing, we have a lot of monks that we call outside monks. I don't like that expression. It simply means that they didn't take sannyas within the Ramakrishna order. They took sannyas outside. There are various reasons for this. We have some educational standards. We have age restrictions. Some were over age. Some simply felt the desire to work independently. Some were from a village where they couldn't get to join any place. So all different reasons. But so simple and so dedicated to the work. There's one young monk, his name was Swami Tyagananda, the same name as our Boston Swami, but a different one. And we went to his village. When you go to the Sundarban area, most people will go by boat. So they had purchased a very small country boat because he had to go from village to village. So we went with him on that boat. We've traveled together, a bunch of monks and a bunch of the householder devotees, Swamiji's brother also. Everywhere we went, they had a big program. You never saw anything like it. There'll be hundreds of kids throwing flowers at us as we're walking in and garlanding us, and we had to speak everywhere and feast everywhere. They made such a fuss. It was really something. But the work that they do is just fantastic. These private monks are so dedicated. They have they don't have the security that we have as monks of the order. Where their next meal will come from, they don't necessarily know, but tremendously dedicated. So I was so inspired by them, and such a simple life. We get such good quality food, such a nice place to stay, even in India. In this country, of course, even more. But compared the standard of living that the monks have in India is so much higher than the average villager will have. especially these poor places. And yet they live more like the villagers there. So this was such a wonderful thing to see. Most of these children will be the first ones in their families to go to school at all, and certainly the girls, because we know the education of women is so much less, especially in these little villages. So it was wonderful to see all of this, tremendously inspiring, and everywhere, they asked for our blessings, and they would line up hundreds of them to make pranam and do all of that. So it was really quite an experience, and to see this work that even after so many years of being outside of India and away from Shikra, how Swami Sarvadevanji still has that tremendous devotion, and anytime he gets pranami or any money like that, it'll all go for that type of work. I'll mention one final example, and I'll stop. There's a place in the district of Purulia. Purulia is also a very poor area, and this is a village in that area called Paragram. It's mostly a tribal area also. There's so many tribal areas in India. I didn't realize there's so many like that. There are two women that some of you may have met, because they come to this country from time to time to raise money. And one is Bharati and the other is Ranjana. They were inspired by Swami Lokeshwaranandaji. Now let me say a word about Swami Lokeshwaranandaji. How many of you have seen him and met him? Probably the Institute of Culture, right? The Institute of Culture, as the name implies, is a highly cultured place. and we think of it for all intellectuals and babus and wealthy people and everything. He also started Narendrapur, which we also associate with good families and most intelligent kids and everything. But his real passion was with the poor children in the villages. And most people don't know that when he was in Narendrapur and everything, he started all of these projects, especially in this Midnapur area and also the Purulia area and everything, for these very poor children. So he inspired these two. This Bharati is a doctor herself, and Ranjana, I think, may have been a school teacher or something. Neither one married, and they whole life is dedicated to this work that they were inspired to do by Swami Lokeshwaranandaji. So in this little village, they started out with just some free dispensary, and the doctors would come and would treat the poor villagers. They would send buses out to bring them in, those who had no transportation. Then they started an eye hospital there. They called it Lokeshwaranandaji Memorial Eye Hospital. It's probably the best eye hospital in all of West Bengal, one of the best in the country now. You see these glasses I have? It took me about 2 weeks to get these glasses. They do it in 20 minutes.
No.
20 minutes. They'll come, they'll do that, they'll go and they'll do the lenses and they'll put them in the frames. So these villagers will come and they'll get new glasses the very same day. They'll do all sorts of eye surgery. These doctors, they come from Calcutta. Not only don't they take any money, but it's mostly money that they donate to keep this hospital running. And they're always raising money. Devotees give money for these places. They started a school for these poor village children. They started programs for teaching the women sewing and arts and crafts and other things, so that they can also make some money. So we stayed there for 3 days, I think. I know them very well. They've come to our center several times, and we also try to support them a little bit. So to see their dedication through Swami Lokeshwaranandaji, the dedication of these doctors, all these young girls are working there as nurses and as school teachers, volunteer. Yeah. So it's really the inspiration. This is what Swamiji wanted, especially for India. He wanted these people willing to sacrifice everything for the uplift of the country, especially for the poor. So this is being done. We may not realize it, If we go to visit our centers in India, we may think that just lectures and cultural things and everything, but so much work is being done. So this trip was wonderful for me. I was inspired on so many different levels by the holy company, by the holy place, by the tremendous selfless work of the householder devotees, the private monks and private ashrams and everything, that I thought that I'd share some of these things with you and encourage everyone. Two things. One, if you've never been to these places, at least once in your life, go stay at Balarmat. They'll arrange there for your visit to all of these places. It's very, very easy. You go there and you tell them that you want to go to Kamarpukur or Janabati. They'll have a driver and a car. They'll take you there. They'll wait there. They'll bring you back. Then for day trips, they'll take you to Dakshineswar, to Holy Mother's place, all of these places. They'll do everything. So this is the first thing. Do that. And the second thing, get immersed in this gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And once you've been to these places, then when you read it, then you'll know what it means. Thakur sitting on the small cot facing north. You'll be able to picture all of these things. Very helpful at the time of meditation. So let me stop here. And if anybody would like to ask any questions or say anything. We recently, one more thing. We recently had a visit from the Swami Pranavananda. Did anybody see him or know about him? He is another monk of the order who left the order because he felt called to do some of our monks need some independence, not all our company people, organization people. And he felt this call to work with these very poor fishermen villagers in Rameshwaram, in that area. And does wonderful work. These people that nobody cared about, many of them are refugees from Sri Lanka, and many of them, these typhoons come and the villages get washed away and everything. So he devoted his whole life to that type of work. So there's so many examples that way of tremendously inspiring individuals and places.